Welcome, everybody. My name is Scott Turnbull. I'm the technology director with US Ignite. We're having a special video interview today with Kyle Pinnell from Carto. He's a solutions engineer with them. Welcome, Kyle. Great to have you here.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back.
Thank you so much. Now, I have to apologize to Kyle because we had a great webinar last week that was around the uses of data as it relates to COVID response. Kyle was a great guest there, but we had a video glitch that cut out a good portion of his resources that he was talking about and his experience with Carto. And I wanted to recapture that this week because I thought it was a great way for cities to get started with geospatial data and responding to needs as they arise in their community related to COVID. I've seen a lot of great examples around restaurant openings and communities in need. I've even seen some communities out in Oregon actually using it to track which public bathrooms are open for people in public spaces because that's not apparent. There's all kinds of economic data work that we've done with Carto previously. So it really is a great resource. And I want to make sure communities had a chance to take a look at it. So thank you very much again, Kyle, for joining us. And maybe you can start out with a little bit, just give the audience a brief overview of what Carto is, what its capabilities are, and where people normally use it.
Yeah, so we are a location intelligence platform, and we help companies solve a variety of business problems that have to do with spatial data. So the chief uses therefore of Carto is teasing insights out of data sets, especially with the spatial component, to solve their business problems. And we originally started it as an open source project called CartoDB. So a lot of people in the data visualization world know us from those days. And CartoDB is still actually open source, and many of our libraries are still open source. But Carto as a platform is a SaaS platform for solving business problems with spatial data.
Great. And now I want to really emphasize for our community, it really supports a broad range of developers, everywhere from down to text files and spreadsheets, all the way to Python programming. I've seen all of those APIs and interfaces. So where do you see most of the users bringing their data from? Is it spreadsheets? Are they scripting in Python? What's the background?
I mean, the amazing thing about it is it can be from any data source. So it can be your own database. So we have a wrapper that will query your database on a regular basis. It can be, so you can set that up so you don't have to move your data anywhere. You can just keep it in your own database. Right. We have connectors to play with ArcGIS. We have connectors now to play with Google's BigQuery. You can bring in flat files. You can bring in shape files, Geo JSON, CSVs. You can even bring in, and I want to mention this for people watching this who are interested in possibly using Carto, you can bring in non-geocoded data. So say you have states or counties, or you have hospital buildings, something that doesn't actually have a lat long attached to it yet. And Carto makes it really easy to geocode. So we really, I'm not just because I work here. Right. We make it really easy to work with any type of geospatial data.
Yeah, that's really why I wanted to make sure people got a chance to see it, because I was impressed with how easy it was. And I know we'll see in a second an example, but I know it does stuff like address lookup for geocoding for you. And it sort of automates some of the manual work people often have to do in geospatial databases. Before we jump into the example, I really wanted you to talk about the grant program that you mentioned earlier when we were talking before the recording here. And it's around COVID support and the availability of Carto for those communities. So could you tell us a little bit about that grant program?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, just to give you some context, if you don't know the GIS world, a lot of people who go into GIS are people who really want to help the world, or save the world, if you will. So this Carto was actually founded because roughly 9 years ago, there weren't great tools for visualizing large data sets. In this case, it was Amazon deforestation. So that's actually like the genesis story of Carto is this group of guys in Spain needed to be able to better visualize large data sets, because you can imagine the amount of data that goes into tracking deforestation of trees. And so that's like the core DNA of the company is solving world's problems. And so we have already an existing grants program, and we extended that to accommodate for projects that have to do with COVID-19. And so we made it an open application. It came out in early March, and we've already approved over 120 applications, grantees, from 40 countries around the world. And we've seen just an amazing number of projects come out of it. One of my favorite Slack channels internally is our COVID-19 channel, because I get to see almost every day, if not several times a day, a new project get launched, a new grantee approved. And so, yeah, it's fun for us. I mean, we love solving business problems. We also really love solving social problems like this, and seeing our software get used for good.
That's great. Thank you so much. Now, I'd love to dive into an example. One in our webinar that, again, unfortunately, we lost some of the footage on. We had the city of Boston in talking about some data, uses of data that they had around communicating open hours of businesses, location of restaurants that might be available for curbside pickup, and communicating more things like that. And you were able to really quickly transform some of that spreadsheet data into a public interface that any city could replicate in their own local area. So can you share that example and walk us through how that might be done?
Yeah, totally. I'm going to share my screen and then just kind of walk you through this example. So for context, I was able to listen to some people from the city of Boston speak about the efforts that they are doing that you just mentioned. And I was just curious, like, oh, yeah, it seems like they were actually a little bit struggling with some of the tools. Not struggling is not the right word, but they were using a variety of tools to make this work. And of course, I'm very biased, but I was like, oh, we could do this really easily with Carto Builder. And so the way I would tend to think about it, or how I would approach this, is most cities now, thankfully, we're in this era of open data and open access to data. Most cities are making their data really readily available. There's almost too much data, you could argue. And so I just was curious. The woman, Jaslyn, I believe, was talking about helping
Joycelyn Youngblood.
Joycelyn Young. Sorry, my bad on her name.
That's fine.
She was talking about some parking data that they were making. They were geocoding, or they were making an interface for, so that people could park more easily for free at nearby hospitals during this crisis. So I was able to go on to, it's called Analyze Boston. It's on data.boston.gov, so it's their open data portal for Boston City, and download their parking meters data here. They give it to you in a variety of formats, which is really nice. This is just amazing compared to what we used to have to deal with. And within Carto, because Carto makes it so easy to consume data, any geospatial data, I have my Geo JSON here down on the lower left-hand side of my screen. Here's our little uploader UI. And you can see here, basically, there's a variety of formats. It was just as simple as drag and dropping this Geo JSON file from the open data set.
If I could, I want to point out, so I know we're talking about Geo JSON, and some people who aren't used to that, geospatial data, that might seem intimidating. It's actually a simple text format, but I did want to point out it does native Excel files, it looks like, as well as CSV text files, right?
Yeah, exactly. So here I have a couple layers here within the Builder interface. If I wanted to add a new layer, I can bring in my existing data sets, or right here with an upload, yeah, I can take in CSVs, Excel files, zip files, shape files are a really common geospatial format. Yeah. GPX might be something that like you would record on an Apple Watch. So like I've recorded bike rides, and that's in a GPX format, and then bring it into Builder just to play around with it and visualize it. So it's really, really easy. You do not need to be a geospatial pro to use this interface.
Perfect.
And so I brought in, I believe these are census tracts of Massachusetts. And so I have these two different layers here. I'm going to turn off the census tracts layer, but I just wanted to kind of show you in case you need to visualize counties or census areas, because that's a common thing. And here within this layer, this is a layer here on the left side of my screen, I have this snow emergency parking data set from Boston. And I believe this is what they repurposed for the for the COVID example. And so here I have this data set. I can style it. I can change the color of these points. I can actually add pop-ups really easily. So obviously, if you see points on a map, you really want to have some context on what you're looking at. And so here I just click, I'm going to add a pop-up light style. It's really visually intuitive. Here's the items I want to show in my pop-up. I'm going to click all because that's just usually what I default to if I'm exploring. And then right there, you have a nice little hover pop-up. I can actually style it differently if I want, according to click versus hover. And you can see here that it's not too terribly like technical. I'm not having to like code or mess around with HTML or CSS like you normally would if you were building this from scratch.
Sure.
But if I want to, if you do have technical people on your team, I want to mention this, that what I also really love about Builder is you can hop into the code very easily if you need to. So say you want to make something look a very specific way, or you want to concatenate two columns together, you want to present it in a specific way, you can have your developer write some HTML. And then if you have, say, data people on your team, you can hop into the SQL database. It's a Postgres behind the scenes to be able to play with the data and like actually visualize what the columns are doing. But for a non-technical user, you can just stay out here at the more what you see, what you get interface.
Sure. And the minimal data input for that is really just, and I'm asking a question. It's just a column that gives you maybe the address for the physical address within the city. And that's probably it, right? That's the minimum you would need?
Yeah, exactly. So to be able to display something on a map, you do need what's called the geom column. So it's like the geometry column.
Right.
And so right here, you can see these lat longs. They came in really nicely from the Boston Open Data Set. But if you don't have those, like I mentioned, if you don't have those readily available, say you bring this data set in here and you don't have the geom column, then Carto is going to make it really easy within, it's what we call an analysis to geocode that up. So obviously, this has already geocode to it.
Sure.
But sorry, I'm clicking a little fast, but if you go to the analysis tab, add new analysis, and then right here, you can see on the top right where I'm mousing over, I can say use street addresses, city names, or other location data to create these point geometries. And so that's going to basically create those from scratch. And so, yeah, you don't have to mess with that on another service. It's all done within this builder. And last point, just to make sure it's clear for people, is then right now this is set to private, it's untitled, but I can really just easily click this to public and publish the new results with a few little clicks. And so you can say you want to share it with your teammates and you don't want the whole world to see it yet. You can password protect it to start with, or you can make it public if you want. And so anybody can then consume that and benefit from that map.
That's fantastic. And you're using parking data that was from a snow emergency, but I know relating it to COVID, I believe the use case that Boston had come to us with was, in their example, was that they were developing parking locations for healthcare professionals to make sure that they sort of stay separated from the regular crowd and they'd have to worry about being infected or infecting other people. And that was a really great use of pre-existing data for the COVID emergency through an interface like this. I can tell you, I know my wife works in homeless relief and remediation. And there's a lot of need to bring up testing maps, pop-up testing locations, tent cities that might be coming up as it relates to homelessness, and tools like this really become invaluable for communicating between teams, communicating with the city. So it is great to see it. I'd love to hear some of your examples of some of the projects you said that have been increasingly approved through this grant programs. What are some of the exciting projects that you're starting to see Carto used as it relates to COVID response?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we've seen over 120. I believe the count's higher since I updated my recent count. We have a really enormous blog post that we're constantly updating, and you've linked to that, and I'll make sure that we link it in this video as well. So it's carto.com/blog, and then this is a list of not all of our grantees, but just some of the ones we wanted to call out. We've seen some amazing projects come out of this. One that I really admire in particular is called Students Against Corona. And this started in the UK and has now spread to India, parts of the US, and a couple other countries. And it's basically what you can imagine, a marketplace for people who want to help and people who need help. So a common use case might be an elderly person who doesn't want to be exposed to COVID in the grocery store, having a student do their grocery shopping for them. And so these guys created essentially using open tools like Google spreadsheets and forms, and then and Carto as well. They created this marketplace for people to connect people who want to help to people who need help. So that was a really cool example. It's not like your typical map dashboard that we commonly see. It's more of like a private marketplace, and they have to do things like, you know, protecting people's names and making sure they vet people before they expose people's contact to this this interface. So I can't actually show you that, which is a good thing, because you would see a bunch of names. You need to be vetted to join their program. So that's been amazing. That started by like a couple, you know, teenagers, like 14-year-old people, 16-year-old people, high school students who are pulling this off now. Great. I mean, so that's one I really like. And then what we also see are a lot of really cool map dashboards that are, I call them micro-regional map dashboards. And so they're basically, we've all seen, you know, Worldometer, and we've seen these different, you know, country count levels. But, you know, what's amazing is like actually seeing people do these in their communities. So showing like which hospitals have been sterilized recently, showing like there's this group in Brazil that they used like spatial statistics, geospatial statistics, to generate a model on projected hospital demand. And so they could show that to their community to show like where they expected health resources to be under strain. I mean, there's so many, and there's like one we saw around like corn production and COVID, trying to make a case. This was by the Rural Innovation Map, trying to tell a story or help people understand how like basically farm workers would be impacted, or how the corn harvest would be impacted. I mean, there's kind of the sky's the limit. And so I really recommend checking out this blog post to get a sense for the kinds of things, the kinds of data that people are joining to their regional data sets and trying to tell a story or do some good in their community.
That's great. And we'll be sure to link that blog in the post that we put up along with this video later. So look for those links there, as well as a link to Carto itself and the grant program that you're running. Kyle, yeah. Anything you want to close with? Anything we've missed that you wish we would have asked about Carto as it relates to COVID support?
Not really, no. I just want people to know that most cities have open access databases that makes it really easy for non-technical people to download a CSV or a Geo JSON file to spin up a map. I want people to know that Carto Builder is amazingly easy to use, and we have a variety of tutorials on our website that will teach you how to use it in case you don't, or in case you do want to kind of dip your toe in the geospatial water. And I just would love people to know that we've approved every grant that we've had, and there's just a variety of people doing amazing projects. And you could probably even reach out to them if you have any problems with, like, you know, a mapping question or something that you're getting stuck on, and even borrow their code. So there's just like a lot of people trying to step up and make these resources and these tools available and help communities get the most out of them.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And I know we've got a lot of bound up talent at home right now between the students and people who might unfortunately be out of work, but there's a lot of tools available to people who can make an impact in their community. Carto is a great tool for that. I'd encourage everyone to get involved. I know they've got a great user community behind it, so reach out to those resources that are associated with them. They'll really engage with you to get answers. You'll see a lot of great examples. So I want to thank you very much, Kyle, and I want to thank Carto for their support for communities around this COVID response. Thank you for making the time to talk to me today. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Take care.